Hello everyone. Today my group member, which is Miss Sangita North and myself, will be presenting our simulated lesson plan for grade 10. Now we would have set out to achieve a few objectives. The first one being selecting a subject and a grade. Our subject that we would have selected was geography and our level was grade 10. Now our duration, our time period was between 15 to 20 minutes and that would have been the stimulated recording. The approach that we would have choose is a more of student-centered learning, and this is whereby the student will be the person or the individual that is engaging more into the lesson. Then we would have think of it as educator now. How do technology help to visualize or help us understand this lesson? So we had this question in mind while creating our lesson. Then we move on to what students would learn, and this is more of the objectives. And students, we set out that students were able to identify. Now they were able to identify the four main layer and they were able to do so correctly. And we would want them as the educator to do it from the outside to the inside. The second point is that we allow them to describe, so state the key characteristics, including the state, the composition of each layer, and then we now move on to comparing them. After knowing each one of these characteristics, we will now want to compare them among the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. We will use a diagram to give them a little more visual understanding of where each one of them is placed and why is it placed or why does it have a specific description or makeup. Then, of course, we'll need to connect them. Now, knowing the concept, we will allow the students now to connect the concept that they know. So we'll allow them to link it to volcanoes, earthquakes, and plate movements because this is the four layer of the Earth's surface and they all link to different other subtopic. And this will help us to navigate around our future lessons. Then we'll allow the students to demonstrate. So we'll have a complete digital quiz and a worksheet to help them to understand. Now, after them able to identify, we discussed in the classroom through PowerPoint presentation and videos, we will want to now test the students to see what they would have grasped from whatever would have been illustrated into the lesson. Then we move on to how technology enhances lesson. Now, in our 21st century classroom, there is so much technology that we could use, but this is just a four or five that we choose to use in this lesson. Now, we would have used PowerPoint, whereby we would have helped the student to guide through the lesson, mainly giving them the topic, summary points, objectives, and help them to not feel too clustered or feel that we're just speaking and there's not no illustration of any of such that we're speaking of, right? Then we move on to YouTube video presentation or video whereby we would have take the students now into a little bit real world experience whereby we would have demonstrate or we would have give them a look of each one of the layer of the earth. Then our Jambo board, and this would have helped to be a little more interactive because it helped the students or it instructed students to just drag and drop the label into specific slots, and this was an activity that brings the entire class together. Then we had the quizzes, and the quizzes was done by Google and Kahoot, and this was the quiz to help us to have a more formative assessment. Also, with the quiz, we would have gained immediate feedback to see where the students stand and how well did the educator deliver that lesson. So this was important to actually test the outcome or the or how the students would have grasped or retain the knowledge that we would have teach or went through this lesson. Okay, then we move on to the lesson flow from the surface to understanding. So we have our introduction whereby we introduce the topic, we give the definition, we allow the students to brainstorm or think what they or brainstorm what they think the topic or the lesson would be about. Then we have the objectives, whereby we would have state what we want the students to know, key terms, if we want them to identify or describe, that will be stated in the objective. Then we have our video presentation, whereby it would allow the students to now see digitally or have a more picture understanding of how each of the layer connects or work with each other. Then here's where the teacher would now comes in and give the correct labeling of the diagram and guide questioning to see if the student actually understand what the video would have just displayed. Then we would have move on to collaborative activities such as the Google slide and the Jamboard board talking, whereby the students were able to move around the ideas. Then we have the formative quiz, which was done by both Kahoot and Google Forms, and this allows students to have a more interactive and allow the educator to have a direct feedback of the student. Then we had the closing or exit ticket, whereby the students summarize. I learned that today I learned, and they state what they learned or what did they learn new about today's lesson. I now hand over to my colleague, Miss Knott, who will continue our summarized lesson.
Thank you, Christina. I will now share with you how this lesson actually came to life and what evidence we gathered along the way. First, we have our video recording. This is a 15 to 20 minute simulated classroom lesson that shows the full flow from the boiled egg set into the induction right through to the exit ticket with technology integrated at each stage. Secondly, we have our quiz results. The Kahoot and Google Forms response gave us a summary of student understanding. More importantly, they showed us exactly where the misconceptions were. For example, students confusing the outer core and the inner core. Third, we would have collected student work, the samples of the students' work. These are the completed layer diagrams and comparison tables, which show evidence of collaborative learning and accurate labeling. And finally, we have screenshots of digital activities on Jamboard and Google Slides. They serve as a visual proof of student engagement and participation. Together, these four pieces of evidence shows that the lesson was not just planned on paper, it was delivered and also that it worked, right? Then we have, I'm trying to get to the other slide. So our reflection, challenges, and solutions, right? So of course, no lesson would ever go perfectly. So allow me to share four challenges that we would have experienced and how we would have dealt with each one. So the first challenge was the concept itself. It is abstract. Nobody can dig down and look at the earth's mantle and so students cannot observe it directly. Our solution was to make the invisible visible. We use the video animation, color coded diagrams, and the interactive labeling activity. The second challenge was time management. Um, Fitting a full lesson into a 15 to 20-minute recording meant we could not rush the key concepts. So we practiced the script several times, kept the introduction brief, and we used clear transition statements to move smoothly between stages. The third challenge was technology access. Not every classroom would have had reliable internet and a device, right? So we planned offline alternatives from the start. We downloaded the video beforehand, projected the group, right? They projected the group activity, so it only needed one device, and prepared it, printed worksheets. The fourth challenge was student engagement. So we had like some of the grade 10 learners, they were shy, so they didn't want to be involved in classroom discussion and so on. So we would have the paired collaborative activities solve this, right? Where the students would have discussed first with their partner. This would have built their confidence, and then they were able to share with the class. This have on So what impact did all of this have on the students and on us as teachers, right? So for student learning, the technology allowed us to reach multiple learning styles in one lesson. The visual learners were able to benefit from the diagrams and the video. The auditory learners engaged through the explanation and discussion, and the kinesthetic and social learners thrived in the hands-on collaborative task, right? So the instant quiz feedback meant misconceptions were corrected on the spot, not a week later. Overall, technology took an abstract geography concept and made it concrete. In terms of personal growth, this project would have genuinely changed how we think about teaching. We grew confident in selecting tools that match the objectives rather than choosing tools because they, look impressive. We learned to plan for technology failure and to always have a backup plan, right? An offline backup plan. So we came to understand that a tool should support the teacher. It should never replace the teacher, and we would have developed real skills in inclusive differentiated lesson design, along with an appreciation for immediate digital assessment, right? So some key takeaways. A digital tool should not replace a teacher, but rather it should support explanation, participation, and assessment, right? And it must have alignment. Every digital tool must serve as a clear teaching purpose. It must have inclusion. We must always plan to have offline alternatives for students with limited access. Then we must have feedback. We must use instant digital assessment to catch and correct misconceptions early. Then we must have collaboration. We must have activities or peer activities that build confidence in shy learners and deepen understanding. And then constructivism. Students learn best when they actively build knowledge themselves, right? Not when they simply receive it. And then we have our conclusion. So to conclude, this capstone project demonstrated that thoughtful technology integration can transform an abstract geography concept into an engaging student-centered learning experience, right? By combining visual tools, collaborative activities, and instant assessment, we would have created a lesson that engaged multiple learning styles. It provide immediate feedback, and it remain inclusive and practical, so that the students, they stayed focused on the learning outcomes. Above all, the experience reinforced that effective technology use is not about having the newest apps. It requires planning, purpose, and flexibility. And then we have our reference here um, on the screen here for you. So thank you so much for listening.